Hi everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay or Jaylan Salah as you formerly know her, film critic at Geek Vibes Nation, In Session Film, and Keith Loves Movies. Today I have the pleasure to interview the director Law Chen and producer Jon Hsu about their documentary starring Jerry as himself. One of the wildest documentaries I've seen recently. It will announce its theatrical debut in New York City at the IFC Center November 6th, and it's just a wild tale, like something that it feels like a Chinese, like a Russian doll, one from the other. And it just feels like taking me from one place to the other, done very creatively. I really enjoyed it. Oh, Jonathan is here joining us. I really want to know, first of all, who picked the great title? Because it's just so good. I like it. Starring Jenny as himself. Who picked it?
Oh man, I don't remember Law.
I, I think I have to take credit for that because I was spending so much time trying to find the perfect title for this movie. And just so your viewers know what it's about, starring Jerry as himself is a docu-fiction hybrid film about an ordinary immigrant dad retired in Florida who becomes a spy for the Chinese police. And that person is Jonathan's father, actually. So there was so much truth behind it. It was a spy thriller. It was a documentary. But what was it really about? It was really about Jerry, and it really about the fact that we got Jonathan's dad to play himself in this movie about his experience as an undercover agent. So this title kind of came up kind of at the last minute and really encapsulated like the feeling of the film and what the film was all about.
So I just want to know, as a documentarian, as a director, Law, how is it easy or difficult to take a story from a friend, from someone close to you, and then turn it into a film? Like, was it even easier or was it difficult to tackle while retaining, like an outsider point of view at the same time as a filmmaker?
That's a great question. I think I can start with how I even heard about the story in the first place, just to kind of
Yeah.
set it up. About 3 years ago, Jonathan, who I've been working with for about 10 or more years, he's a line producer, I'm a director. He calls me 3 years ago and he said that something terrible had just happened. And I was like, what could possibly be that terrible? And he was like, I just found out my dad has been working as a spy for the Chinese police for the last 2 months. I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I don't know. I really don't know. Can you help me find out? So we fly down to Florida where his dad is retired. We set up a camera and we start interviewing Jerry. And Jerry weaves this fantastical tale about being an agent in a money laundering investigation. And he's taking surveillance photos of his local bank. And he's wearing a wiretap for the Chinese police to talk to bank tellers. And he's kept it all secret from his family. And immediately I was like, there is a movie here. There is a wonderful movie here. Let's go make this movie. And this is not any ordinary documentary because as you were asking, like I'm observing my friend's family and there is a personalness to it. But my ultimate goal was wanting to take this sort of ordinary story in a way because it's about an immigrant father. Jerry's not an action hero. Jerry's not a movie star. He's just a regular guy. How do you go take this story and make it something extraordinary? How do you go and make it creative and different and interesting from a filmmaking perspective? So I think that was really my focus, almost needing to step back and treat them not as friends and family and treat them as actors on a set to give it that separation, to give it that sort of creative extra step. And then Jonathan's job was to protect his family and protect his family's story and really be there. And it was this sort of balance along the way of trying to make this thing. But it is so interesting having the access and the intimacy of being a friend of the family making this thing. It it's a crazy experience. Yeah.
Definitely shows. So, Jonathan, what I want to ask you, when we create art, we discover sometimes things about ourselves that are completely different from, like knowing our normal everyday self. So, what did you discover about Jerry That probably otherwise, if you hadn't done this film with Law, you would never have known it about him.
Yeah, I think there, there's definitely a point in the film where you do sort of realize, wow, Jerry's doing like acting very well in these recreations, and to the point that he even got Best Actor at a couple different film festivals. I'm sure like the trained actors are very disappointed that some walk-on dude just won the award. But yeah, I was very surprised that he could win those things and that he could be in front of camera and just know the dialogue. I mean, because it happened to him. So it was his words that he wrote with Law. And, it was very surprising to see my father in that light. Growing up as a kid, he was always, gone before I woke up for school and going to work. And then he would come home late at night. He'd just like be in his business socks, just like on the bed, just like completely passed out. And so I didn't really get to know this side of him at all growing up as a kid, and to actually have him on set doing what I do every day in day out on production, I was just so amazed that he could handle it. I know I couldn't.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say he is so talented, Jonathan. I gotta tell you, he's a natural. It's
yeah, he is a natural. Yeah, yeah. Cast him. He's available for work.
He, it was interesting because part of that was discovering that there was this whole other side of Jerry. That is what one of the most incredible discoveries of this film was, which is as we were interviewing him, we found out that Jerry had always wanted to be an actor and a writer when he moved to America in the 70s and kind of gave it all up to be an engineer and raise his family. And in a way, he got to go do that again in this film,
Yeah.
despite what happened. That was this gift that we were able to give to him.
It was like
Um,
the catalyst for him to do. It's very strange. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, Law, I love some of the camera work here. Like, there are amazing shots where it's like a point of view and then it shifts completely, or the scene just fades away, but it continues. I don't know, because it's so well made. How did you agree or like focus on what you wanted to do? Your like technique for this film, the cinematography work, all even, like the directorial choices, which led to it being a very impressive picture.
well, thank you so much. It's certainly not a traditional documentary or piece of fiction in the techniques that it uses. So I think that because of that, we chose to tell this story in a unique way. Like I said before, we wanted to do something that was um, initially the question was, is this a documentary or is this a piece of fiction? How do we want to even go make this thing? And at some point we turned to Jerry and we're like, Jerry, would you like to play yourself? And Jerry was the one who was like, yes, only if it's a spy movie, because he felt like James Bond, he felt like Jason Bourne, he wants the audience to feel the same way. So we were like, okay, let's go make a spy movie that's also a documentary. How do you go do that? And you had to make all of these choices to make a film within a film. So within this greater film is a spy film about Jerry's entire experience, and we used all the techniques that um, spy films use to try to give you that feeling. We're anamorphic, we're handheld, we're like erratic, and everything feels really high tension. There's also moments of surrealism, of interesting kind of filmmaking technique, because we're in Jerry's head. This is all from his experience, all from his perspective, and we want the audience to kind of take that ride with him. So all of those choices were done in that way for the spy film. And then if you step back, you realize, wait, this is actually a documentary about this family and about this man. So that was also tackled in a different way. That was tackled in a way that made you felt like when you came into the film, oh, I'm watching a documentary right now. That's all this is. It's nothing more. So we began with all the traditional documentary kind of tropes with archival footage and sit down interviews and whatnot. and it slowly merges into something much more than that. So it was really this borrowing from a lot of different techniques and putting it and creating something new with it.
So, not to spoil anything, but I feel that there is even a deeper layer to the documentary behind it. What I love is how important do you think that we need stories, like from, let's say, us, like I'm Egyptian, like we have different, diverse experiences than your average, like white creators or white filmmakers and stuff like that. So, how do you think it's important for us to tell our stories and tell different stories as opposed to, like the norm or what is usually on the surface and what is given the bigger experience? So immigrant stories, for example, how important do you think it is to always put them to the front and also tell them in a creative way so that we get a bigger conversation going?
Mm.
That's a great question. That is sort of the age-old question. I think stories are important, stories are universal. Um, this film at the end of the day is a human story. It is a universal one because everybody has parents. The ultimate thing we want at the end of this film and what Jerry wanted making this film was for you to call your parents. The idea that everyone kind of our generation is now thinking about what do you do with our aging parents in this day and age? How do you care for them? How do you connect with them? How do you speak to them? Is this very universal idea. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter who you are, you can relate to this in some way. So that's the kind of universal truth at the end of this film. But when you walk in and you see the poster and it's not a famous actor and it's just an ordinary immigrant dad, what's going to convince you to come watch this thing? That's
Mhm.
where the filmmaking and the technique comes into play, where we had to make this genre in some way. We had to make this a spy thriller because otherwise, if it's another family drama about another immigrant family, again, like I said before, who cares? Nobody really cares. So it's like, let's make them care. Let's make the most interesting, unique film possible such that it gets them in the door. And then after you sat down, you realize, oh, there is that universal truth here. This does relate to me. This does speak to me in such a way that I want to tell somebody about it. So it the way we wanted to make it was both form and function. From a filmmaking perspective, we wanted to make something that was interesting to watch and for filmmakers to be like, whoa, like use that technique or this technique or that was cool. But also it was a way to, you know, make a foreign seeming story more relatable. You're watching this person's life that you have no idea about for 75 minutes. And you really by the end of it, you're like, man, Jerry reminds me of my dad. And that's the goal.
Definitely. And then those family dynamics kind of reminds you of the family dynamics in your own life. And this is what I wanted to ask Jonathan. Like when you have yourself and your family on camera and there's a bit of exposure, how does it feel for you when you're not familiar with being, you're not a trained actor, neither is your family. So how familiar does it feel? Also, what is the role of law to make you feel, to ease you into it or to take you into it or just to make you go as natural because it felt like another family dinner for me. Like, wow, people are just interacting. How awesome. It didn't feel formative, didn't feel performed. How was it for you to be exposed or just a bit of vulnerability in front of the camera with your family?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're kind of touching on the subject of representation and for us to put a not a something fabricated, but for Law to be able to turn the lens on a family just going through uh, an insane experience together and to be able to pull out of us quite like Law would ask us very critical questions that I think most families would want to answer behind closed doors, but he asked us right there in front of camera, like, what is your answer to this? What was Jesse, the older brother, doing during this time? Like, how could we keep this a secret, Jerry, for so long? Like, he would ask these hard questions from us, and then knowing we couldn't hide or behind our words or anything, and that we wanted to put out this message, we spoke our truths. And I think it's interesting because it's like, well, how do you, like like Law was saying, like, how do you market something like this? How do we get people in the door? Well, we wrapped up this documentary into a spy thriller, but I think some people will come to this movie purely because of the representation, to see a older Asian American or Asian person on the posters, or a family in the trailer. They'd be like, "Oh, that seems like my family. They're talking in English and they're talking in Chinese. That's like my family." And so I'm gonna go check out what is this about, because I don't get exposed to this kind of material or films on my Netflix queue or anything like that. So I'm gonna go out to the theater or actively go and rent this movie to find out what it's about.
Wow.
Yeah.
To add to that, it's when you first look at it, it's like, oh, I that looks like an ordinary immigrant dad to me, but I don't think you can guess what actually happens to him
Right.
for this journey. And the idea that he becomes a spy for the Chinese police is one that at every festival that we went to was so fascinating to people. I think that that calls to question, the bigger geopolitics at play. China is in the news all the time, every day. And that aspect of him becoming a spy is fascinating to people. And that's what usually brings people in, and they leave
Yeah.
feeling very, very different. And it's so unexpected how that shift happens. So yeah.
Yeah. I'll also say that I think the people in my family are very entertaining. Like, we're kind of like, I mean, Kathy, who is my real mother, not a
I
casted
love her.
actor, a real, like, people would come up to Law and be like, "Great casting. Where'd you find her?" And it's like, that is Jonathan's
That's John's
mom.
mom.
It's like, that's what I live with. Yeah, they're all like, "When's her
Awesome.
spinoff? Like, when's she gonna have her movie?" Like, these are, I think that's kind of the lightning in the bottle in this instance, where we happen to be this family that are used to performing in a sense. Like, we grew up learning musical instruments like piano, guitar, violin, accordion, trombone, like all sorts of things. Like, our mother pushed us to be artistically trained, like painting. I was a performer as a magician. My brother would go out, like when he was at Duke University, like playing his violin for money. Like, we were not afraid to show who we were as far as talents. And once a camera was on us, we kind of turned on. So whether we knew the camera was on us or not, we all said yes to doing the documentary. But then there were moments in there that Law caught that I think bring the authenticity to the film too, to be like, wow, this is a real family. Yeah.
And like you said before, it's like, oh, they remind you of your family. It's like they were both great actors in their own way. Kathy for just being, this
Fabulous.
bombastic, kind of fabulous, over the top character that reminds me of my mother in a way, and a lot of people's mothers. And then Jerry, this really nuanced, really subtle, very like insular,
Hmm.
quiet, aging father. That is all of our fathers.
Exactly.
You
Most of our
almost
fathers.
rarely see the other way around, actually.
That's so
So,
true. That's so true.
yeah.
But I want to know the influences of spy movies on you, Law, because you definitely must have had a love for action or spy movies because you have like great technique there. I can see you doing a very engaging, exciting thriller or action movie soon because wow, this movie seriously could work on its own as a fiction piece.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I just love the idea of creating suspense and creating mystery and then kind of elevating that with like energy and action and everything. It's like I said before, it's like I want to bring all of those things into this story to make this unexpected hero much more than you would expect, you know? And I think that having you sit there and be like, what is happening to him? And how is this happening? Is my favorite feeling in the world for myself when I watch movies. So that is something I wanted everyone to kind of come onto the journey for Jerry, because that's how he felt. That's how he went through everything.
And did you like were you a fan of, spy movies or serious action movies like the Bourne series or even, because I watched a lot of, for me, Hong Kong films where it's action packed and beautiful. So I don't know, like, do you have a favorite Asian director, American director, anyone who just
Uh,
fueled that passion for you?
have you seen Infernal Affairs?
Yes,
Yes. OG, The Departed. Infernal Affairs is one of my favorite films.
me
Uh,
too.
more Hong Kong cinema, In the Mood for Love, one of my favorite
Oh,
films.
oh my God.
Not a spy thriller.
Wong
Uh,
Kar-wai.
Wong Kar-wai though.
I was just married
But
this guy.
yeah, but like borrowing from a lot of Wong Kar-wai's
Very
techniques,
much.
it's handheld, it's gritty, it's
It has this ethereal
very
quality.
yeah, it's very fluid, it's surreal. Like I love his technique in how he approaches characters and cinematography. Like we're always just with Jerry. Jerry's in almost every single shot. Um, but for broader spy thriller, yeah, Skyfall, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, these are all favorites. But it was actually a lot of the, like I said, the Wong Kar-wai Hong Kong cinema
I
that
adore
influenced
Hong Kong cinema. And
film.
this is why I felt the influence.
Yeah, yeah. And one fun fact, I don't know if you noticed, is the amount, and this is not borrowed from any cinema because they don't really do this that often, but the amount of aspect ratio that changes throughout the film. Why?
Awesome.
Right? Why?
Exactly.
It's for me, it was sort of this, it was a way of staying sane for me because the entire time you're watching the film, the primary question is, what is true? What is the truth? And that was the case for me as the director as well. Because I don't know when Jerry is acting and when he's not acting. I have no idea
Wow.
because he's playing himself and he's recreating the events of his own life, but he is also a living, breathing human being. He's the subject of this documentary as well. So the lines of reality are so blurred that I had to create a rule for myself throughout the creation of this film to help me keep track of what was true. And the rule was the wider the screen is, the more fictional it is. And the more narrow the screen is, the more true it is. So when you open the film and it's archival footage, and that's like 1.1 or 4.3 or Academy, that is archive, it's unedited, it's taken from the most true thing you can do. And then when you get into mini DV, the films that Jonathan and his brothers were making, there's a bit of direction there, but it's still showing a time and a place of them in their youth. But then you get to 16:9 and you're in traditional documentary. And that still requires a little bit of direction. It's me asking hard questions to Kathy and Jerry and the family. So I'm still asking something from them. And then finally, when it transitions to spy film, it goes to full anamorphic at the least expected moment. And that you're in this full spy movie afterwards. And then you just don't know after that what is real and what is not real. And it becomes much more murky. But for me as the filmmaker, that really helped me structurally figure out what is true and then how do you tell the story.
So, what was the most enjoyable scene for you to structure or to shoot, and what was the most difficult? And same goes for Jonathan, like which was the most enjoyable fun you had, but then something kind of like hits you hard. No spoilers, just the feel itself
Right,
of the
yeah.
scene, probably.
For me, the most enjoyable was a lot of the bank scenes. There is a finale at the bank scene where we got to do a Steadicam move in a one shot and do a lot of fun filmmaking techniques where, actors are moving around behind the camera, which when you see it, you'll understand why that's my favorite shot to do. There's a lot of set pieces. That's the one that felt the most like big spy thriller, if you will. And Jerry's sort of just at the center of it. The most difficult was interviewing Jerry. And it was because it was not necessarily because the subject matter was difficult to talk about, because he had already been through the
Yes.
whole experience with the Chinese police as a spy, right? He had done all that. We were doing that every single day. The reason interviewing was difficult is he refused to give an interview as himself.
Right.
He said, I'm only going to give an interview as the character in the spy movie.
Right.
And I
There's
was
like a
like,
moment where he dissociated himself to kind of see himself. I don't know, could have been his actor's process, right? Well, but he had to distance himself from the story to tell the
he
story.
he had created a character for himself, which was the character in the spy film. And he would only talk about that character. And to us, to Jonathan, his son, that was like, is that a way to process everything that happened? Was that a way to have this cathartic, therapeutic experience to process all the things that had happened? Or is that simply him just applying the method?
Exactly.
And
Yes.
that's why to this day, Jerry is still a bit of a mystery to us. So it wasn't like the interview was difficult. It was just conceptually another layer of me asking myself, like, what is real?
Hmm.
I'm being led on this journey of trying to discover the truth. And I hope the audience does as well when they watch this film.
Yeah, for me, the most enjoyable part is the doctor scene in the latter part of the film. That was very enjoyable. And then I think I've watched the movie in full at least 50 times at this point now. Because at every film festival, I'd be like, man, I don't want to watch the movie again. And then there's all the QC process and the editing process of looking at cuts and stuff. But I think sitting there in the theater and watching it with the people at the film festival helps give me an idea of like, are people responding to the right moments and such? But yeah, that scene in particular, it always gets to me. Like, and it's almost like 100% kind of works across like not just in the US, but like when we went to
Everywhere.
Greece, Spain, and Korea and stuff. So it that scene works a lot. So it's very enjoyable when it gets to that scene. I think the part that was least enjoyable was, yeah, like there was this scene where we were in a police station, um, and there would be private moments with me and my father while Law was shooting other scenes with the actors and the who were playing the policemen, where I just kind of saw him kind of like in shock of that we were making a movie about it and that he had to relive it. And there was a moment there where I had to kind of push him along to be like, we have to finish this thing. And are you prepared? Are you ready? Because there was a lot of dialogue for those scenes. And yeah, that was a hard day to get through. There was a lot to get through, and I think on an
We
emotional
we shot
level, it was
we
hard.
shot all of the police scenes in a single day
Yeah.
Oh,
because of budget.
Yeah, yeah.
And all of it, I don't know if we mentioned this before, every piece of dialogue with the police was written by Jerry from his memory.
Hmm.
So it was all real things that he had said to the police and they said back to him. So to me, filming Jerry in his own home with just the three of us feels like, oh, just John needs to do this at home. But suddenly we're in this police station with actors in police uniform and they're reading his dialogue, which he's heard before on the phone, must have hit him very differently.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, that's all part of the process of making this thing, as weirdly as we did.
I really love too that he used this process in a way for his, I think, healing from trauma or healing from whatever, because I feel like the idea of him creating this alter ego, because it feels like an alter ego, it really felt important and essential to him too, the way that he would relive it, but from a distance, from a controlled center. I think it's very good and brilliant. And the fact that he found the filmmaker to back him up and do it, I mean, this is amazing. And his own son producing, like, wow, this is a great idea and a really, really great film. So where are you taking starring Jerry as himself next? What is the journey?
Mm.
It's been a long journey. We have been on the festival run for about a year and a half, which was amazing. Won some awards along the way. Jerry won Best Actor a couple times, and like I said, it's part of the journey. Jerry's story's not over. He's coming to the events. He's coming to the red carpet. He's celebrating his time at the festivals. But we were fortunate enough to be picked up for distribution by Greenwich Entertainment, and we will be having our theatrical premiere in 2 days on Wednesday, November 6th at IFC in New York. And Jerry will be there for a lot of the Q&As, and he's super excited for it. And then it will be coming to streaming right afterwards on the 8th, this Friday. So the journey continues. This small film found its way and found an audience, and people loved it and shared it, and uh, were quite taken aback by what happens to Jerry. And we've gone from festivals to now a wider audience. So it's really, really fun to be able to bring this to
Yeah.
more people.
It's like releasing in Korea on November 13th. Um, so there's and then Japan, I think, later too. So it's definitely found an international audience, but we're very excited for the domestic release with Greenwich and yeah, like to finally be able to tell our friends you can actually get it now. Like it's been a long road for sure.
It's been a long road. It's a small film, but has a big heart, a big story, exciting, a wonderful subject. I was just having the best time of my life watching it.
Oh,
Thank you
great.
so much, Law and Jonathan. Like, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Can't wait for the world to watch starring Jerry as himself. And thank you for talking to me.
Thank you so much. That was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you.